Hi everyone, I'm going to continue reading our Marrow Thieves chapters. We're going to read from Haunted in the Bush today. You should have listened to magic words as well, and if you recall for the agenda today, our exit ticket is right here, and it's these 3 questions. When you click on that link for the exit ticket after you're done listening to this video, you're going to be brought here to our discussion post. And these 3 questions are about those 2 chapters that we've read, Magic Words and Haunted in the Bush. And I'll leave up the questions, so if you have thoughts, you can write them down while I'm reading. Alright, this is Haunted in the Bush. For a week, I'd had trouble sleeping. I wanted to see Mitch and my parents when I closed my eyes, but not in the way they had been coming to me as of late. Mom showing up in my tent with her mouth sewn shut and her left arm missing. Dad sitting by the fire drinking out of a mason jar, then jumping into the flames, when I got close enough to smell the moose hide of his mitts. I spent a lot of time with Riri, and she took full advantage of my resistance to sleep. "Where did you walk from?" "The outer city." "Did the recruiters chase you?" "They would have. My brother stopped them." "Did your brother get taken?" "Yeah, Ree, he got taken." "What did he look like?" "He seemed really big, but I don't think he was. I think maybe he was just always bigger than me. He had eyes that were blue sometimes, but sometimes looked gray, and his hair was almost black. His teeth were crooked, so that the front ones looked like they were holding hands. It was painful, but I didn't really mind. The more I described my brother, my parents, our makeshift community before Dad left with the council, the more I remembered, like the way my uncle jigged to heavy metal. Instead of dreaming their tragic forms, I recreated them as living, laughing people in the cool red confines of Riri's tent as she drifted off. I woke up with stiff muscles and frozen toes on her tarp one morning, her small form huddled under layers, cheeks pink with warmth and rest. I must have fallen asleep in the middle of talking the night before. I could see my breath and hear the near-constant rain pattering on the vinyl walls. A slow, steady drizzle. That's the best we could hope for these days. Meg couldn't explain the science of it, but ever since the north started melting, there were more rains. I shook the damp out of my legs and laced my boots back on, wrapping the tops in strips of fabric that tore as I knotted them. Almost time to replace them. Thank God I was done with the last growth spurt. I'd ended up having to wear flip-flops for weeks. They were the only thing that fit until we scavenged a forgotten fishing lodge and found the boots I wore now. Outside, Wob and Cheeboy were already packing up her tent. "Good morning. Hey Wob, start breakfast yet?" "Twins are on meal duty. They're homesteaders." "Oh, right, I forgot. It was hunting day. Yippee, more squirrel and mushroom stew." She didn't answer. Instead, she gave me a wry look, then started braiding up her hair as she watched Cheeboy work. "Not that I don't like your stew, it's just—" Thankfully, I was interrupted when Slapper farted loud and long from his tent. We couldn't help laughing. "Man, sounds like that one ripped a hole in the ground," one of the twins shouted from the main latrine, behind a dense thicket. Chuckles could be heard from Meg and Minerva's tent. "Gross." Ree was up. With that introduction to the new day, the camp came to life one by one, brushing their teeth with brushes worn to stiff nubs, beating the wet out of clothes by slapping them against trunks, and running tight circles around the perimeter to warm up. I think I want to stop here for just a minute. I think what the author wants me to notice or to know is that these are just kids. I really appreciate how she adds things like he said poop in the last chapter and everyone laughed, and then another one of the kids farts in this chapter. And that may be silly, but I think it's her way of creating a little bit of comic relief and reminding the reader these are kids going through this crazy and sometimes really sad time. So I appreciate that. We sat in a quiet circle, packing our gear and waiting for food. The hunters strapped on the wristwatches we shared. Mig didn't need one. He kept a pocket watch in his jeans. It was important for the hunters to keep time, so we could keep track of each other and the day. "We never used to need things," Mig commented as we wound the mechanisms and checked they were synchronized. "But no one has the skill of telling time by the sky here. Maybe one day we'll run into someone who does." Then we don't have to rely on these things anymore. After a hasty breakfast of mush, the hunters were off, eager to take advantage of the halt in the rain and the appearance of sliced sunlight through the strated clouds. It is often necessary to break up a large group to achieve a goal, especially since a lone shadow can get into more spots without notice than a large group. We were a 50-minute hike from the camp. I want you all to get used to the idea of operating alone. Meg was crouched down in the middle of our huddle, checking the ground for fresh prints. There's sign of deer in this area, maybe something bigger. If we work separately, but together, we should bring back a nice buck. Woohoo! Slapper pumped his fists in the air, being a huge fan of fresh deer meat. But only, Meg continued, looking at the excited boy, if we can stay quiet and focused. Slapper lowered his fist and shuffled his feet. Meg stood, put his hands on his lower back and stretched. We are going to each go our separate ways, so make sure you keep track of which direction you go. Cheeboy and Wob were carrying bows. Slapper, with not having graduated to full hunter status, carried a sharpened stick. Meg had his .45, and I had the rifle slung over my shoulder. Cheeboy used to carry the rifle, but he and Wob had been spending time relearning bow hunting, so it fell to me now. Bows are sustainable. Eventually we won't be able to get more bullets, and at least I can make arrows, he'd explained. I think they just like having these things they share in common, never mind all the hours it provided them alone to practice. Everyone goes a different way. Keep a steady but mindful pace, the same speed we keep on the trail when we move camp. An hour's walk, no more, then you find a lookout and wait. Mig reloaded his handgun and tucked it back into his waistband. If there's a problem, you all know the alarm. Cheeboy? Cheeboy threw his head back and let out a screech that curved into a tail before fading. An eagle. Okay? We all nodded, then turned and pushed off into the bush, like swimmers from the block. I walked southeast, careful to pace my steps, so I was moving neither too fast nor too slow to keep the ground synchronized. That would make it easier to track anyone who didn't return on time. The ground was cold and soggy, and I could feel it through my boots. The earth barely had a chance to absorb the rainwaters before the next deluge. It hadn't been this bad even when I was on the move with my parents and brother. Every year the world was making us more aware of change. After the cities crumbled off the coastline, after the hurricanes and earthquakes made us fear for solid ground to stand on, even now we were waiting for the planet to settle, so we could figure out the ways in which we would be safe. But for now, there was just movement, especially for us, the hunted, trying to hunt. At 59 minutes, 32 seconds, I stopped, pulled my lighter hunt bag and the rifle off my back, and settled into the nook made by a felled tree. I pushed up into the guts of its roots, where they had been yanked out of the ground. The hole it left had filled with filthy water, but the roots were dry and tangled enough to make a comfortable seat. I climbed up into the middle of the roots and leaned back. It was kind of soothing like that, with a dozen wooden knuckles massaging my back. My mind wandered. I tried to keep it focused on my surroundings, but I was tired, and so I let it run a bit off the leash for lack of the energy to remain disciplined. From where we were now, running, looking at reality from this one point in time, it seemed as though the world had suddenly gone mad. So I'm going to stop there, because I feel like I can relate to that. What I'm feeling is this sounds like COVID to me. I know that a lot of this story has to do with climate change, but I have definitely felt like the world's gone mad sometimes this year, with arguments that people have and not knowing if we're going to school, we're not going to school. You have to wear a mask here, you don't have to wear a mask here, and it changes every day. So I can definitely relate to what Frenchie's feeling. Poisoning your own drinking water, changing the earth so much the earth shook and melted and crumbled, harvesting a race for medicine? How? How could this happen? Were they that much different from us? Would we be like them if we'd had a choice? Were they like us, enough to let us live? I thought about the sickness and the insanity that crept like bedbugs through families while they slept. What would I have done to save my parents or Mitch given the chance? Would I have been able to trap a child? To do what? I shuddered. I didn't want to know what they did, and I didn't really want to know if I'd be capable of doing it. Time passed, and I may have fallen asleep once or twice. The world out here was quiet, like the land was holding its breath. But if you listened, really put action into listening, things began to sing. And then there were footsteps. I lifted my head, flexing my arm to raise the rifle into position, soft shuffling over by the pines. I aimed the gun, watching the trees, praying for nothing more than a deer, nothing human, really. It was huge, like a tree that had yanked itself up and was slowly moving into the clearing, a tree with bone-white branches. It walked further into the grass. A moose. Adrenaline made my teeth chatter. Time is slow in that vacuum space. In this new space, I had time to aim squarely between the moose's eyes, watching his muscle control and his skin wrinkle as he bent to take another mouthful of grass. And then I decided against it, lowered my barrel to his chest. Always go for the sure target. Meg had taught us that one on my first hunt. I listened to my elders. Just then he raised his head, so massive, I wondered at the blood it must take to animate, and he saw me. He blinked a long, slow blink, and faltered for only a second or two, before he began chewing again. He turned a bit, so that I knew he knew I was there. I swallowed hard, aiming, fingers exact and stiff. He was so big! It was like he was 100 years old! Imagine being here through it all, the wars, the sickness, the earthquakes, the schools, only to come to this? He exhaled long and loud like the wind. This was food for a week, hide and sinew to stitch together for tarps, blankets, ponchos. This was bones for pegs and chisels. This was me, the conquering hero, marching into camp with more meat than all of us could carry, taking the others back to field dress this gift. This was Rose, looking at me with those big eyes so dark they shone burgundy into the firelight. This was my chance. But could we travel with this meat before it rotted? No. And could we smoke and dry it? No. Mig wouldn't set up camp for that long. So we'd be leaving half, at least half behind. The moose watched all this play out on my face, a dirty boy tangled in the roots of an upended tree, hiding from the world. I lowered the rifle. He blinked once more, then crossed his legs, one over the other, as if at the start of a curtsy, and then turned back into the trees. I couldn't do it. I couldn't let it come to this, not for him, and not for me. Walking back to the meeting point, I swung between peace with my decision and wrenching regret. I was empty-handed, but something in my chest was burning a little bit brighter. As it turned out, I didn't have to worry about Riri having an empty belly. When I made it to the meeting spot, Chi-Boy and Mig were already there, each with a wild turkey strung up in the lower branches of a maple. Grabbed mine in the first 20 minutes. The rest must have been scared off by the shot and headed toward Chi-Boy there. He grabbed one too. Mig was laughing, enjoying a hand-rolled smoke. Slapper was napping, leaning against a log. No luck, French? Watching them pat each other on the back and proudly spin their turkeys, examining the carcasses for size and weight. Nope. 10 past, Chi-Boy said. She'll be here. Meg scanned the area. She's good. 25 after. Boy, give her another 10, and then we'll start off in her direction. She's fine. Better out here than most of us. We'd almost hit the 10-minute deadline when Wob silently slipped in beside us. Chi-Boy sighed, and even smiled, but he made no movement toward her. She was empty-handed, which was weird for her. Not that it bothered me. Everything okay? Mig said. She nodded. Let's head back. Without another word, she led the way back to camp. She didn't tell us what she'd seen out there, until it slipped out a week later. We're going to have to stop there. We will pick up with the next chapter in class, A Plague of Madness, and hopefully we'll find out what Wob had to say. So you want to go ahead and complete this exit ticket? Thanks. Have a great day.